The cool autumn breeze brushed against the young boy's face as he pedaled his blue bicycle through the quiet streets of Pinewood neighborhood. Jaden, a bright 12-year-old with curious eyes and a quick mind, was taking his usual afternoon route home from the library. His backpack was heavy with books about space and detective stories. He loved solving puzzles and figuring things out. As Jaden turned onto Maple Street, something caught his attention. Mr. Wilson's house, the kind elderly gentleman who always gave out the best Halloween candy and told fascinating stories about his days as a judge, had its side door slightly ajar. This wouldn't normally seem strange, except Jaden knew Mr. Wilson had left town yesterday to visit his daughter. He had even fed Mr. Wilson's cat that morning as promised. Jaden slowed his bike, his heart beginning to thump a little harder in his chest. Through the window he spotted shadows moving inside, two figures rushing around in a way that didn't seem right. His first instinct was to keep riding, but then he remembered what his dad always told him. Sometimes doing the right thing means being brave when you'd rather not be. Pulling his bike behind a large oak tree, Jaden took out his phone with slightly trembling hands. He dialed 911, trying to keep his voice steady as the dispatcher answered. 911. What's your emergency? The calm voice asked. I think someone's breaking into my neighbor's house, Jaden whispered, his eyes fixed on the building. Mr. Wilson is out of town, but there are people inside moving around. The dispatcher asked for the address, which Jaden provided clearly. Stay somewhere safe and out of sight. An officer is on the way, the dispatcher instructed. Jaden nodded, even though no one could see him. He remained hidden behind the tree, his eyes never leaving the house. Minutes felt like hours as he waited, watching. Suddenly, the side door swung open. Two men emerged carrying bags that looked stuffed full. They weren't carrying them like they contained clothes or regular items. Their movements were hurried, nervous. One man was tall with a distinctive red cap and a tattoo visible on his forearm. The other was shorter, wearing a dark hoodie despite the mild weather. They tossed the bags into a silver sedan with rust spots on the rear bumper. As they sped away, Jaden's quick eyes caught part of the license plate, RT7. He repeated it, to himself over and over, determined not to forget it. 20 long minutes passed before a police cruiser finally pulled up. Officer Reynolds stepped out, looking bored and already yawning despite it being only mid-afternoon. Jaden rushed over, eager to share what he'd seen. Officer, I'm the one who called, he said, slightly out of breath from excitement. They just left about 20 minutes ago. There were two guys, one tall with a red cap and a tattoo on his arm. The other one was shorter with a dark hoodie. Officer Reynolds looked down at Jaden, his expression shifting from boredom to amusement. Slow down, kid. You're saying you saw a robbery? Yes, sir. They took bags from Mr. Wilson's house. He's out of town visiting his daughter. I even got part of the license plate, RT7. It was a silver car with rust spots on the back. The officer's lips curled into a smirk. That's quite a detailed story. You've been watching those crime shows, huh? No, sir. I mean, yes, I like those shows, but this really happened. I saw them, Jaden insisted, his voice rising slightly as he realized the officer didn't believe him. Officer Reynolds chuckled, shaking his head. Listen, kid, we get calls like this all the time. People think they see something, but it's usually nothing. Probably just some friends of your neighbor picking something up. But Mr. Wilson doesn't have. I'll take a quick look, but next time maybe check with adults before calling 911, okay? We've got real emergencies to handle. The officer's dismissive tone cut through Jaden's confidence like a knife. As Officer Reynolds walked toward the house with an unhurried pace, Jaden stood there, feeling smaller by the second. He didn't know what to do now, but one thing was certain. His dad would be home tomorrow after his deployment, and he would know exactly what to do. Officer Reynolds took his time examining Mr. Wilson's house, barely glancing at the side door that had been forced open. Jaden stood on the sidewalk, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, watching anxiously as the officer made a half-hearted circuit around the property. After a few minutes, Officer Reynolds returned, flipping his notepad closed before he'd written more than a couple words. Just like I thought, kid. Doesn't look like anything serious to me, he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. Door's a little damaged, but that happens with old houses. Probably the wind caught it wrong. Jaden's eyes widened in disbelief. But sir, I saw them. 2 men carrying bags out. They were taking things. Officer Reynolds let out an exaggerated sigh, looking down at Jaden with thinly veiled impatience. Look, I've been doing this job for 15 years. You know how many false alarms I get from people who think they've seen something suspicious? But the license plate, I remembered part of it. RT7. The car was silver with rust spots. The tall guy had a tattoo on his arm that looked like, "Whoa there, detective," Officer Reynolds chuckled, cutting him off. His radio crackled, and he seemed relieved for the distraction. Listen, I appreciate your imagination, but we deal with real crimes, not make-believe ones. Heat rushed to Jaden's cheeks. This wasn't make-believe. He knew what he saw. My dad says we should always report suspicious things, Jaden said quietly, his voice growing smaller against the officer's mockery. Yeah? And what does your dad do that makes him such an expert? Officer Reynolds asked with a smirk, adjusting his belt. He's in the military. Special Forces, Jaden replied, a hint of pride breaking through his disappointment. Something flickered across Officer Reynolds' face, maybe surprise, maybe doubt, before he shrugged it off. Well, the military isn't police work now, is it? Different worlds. He tore off a small piece of paper from his notepad and scribbled something down. Here's the incident number. Not that there's much of an incident, but policy says I gotta give you this. He handed it to Jaden with obvious reluctance. Now go on home. I'm sure you've got homework or video games or something. Jaden took the paper, noticing how empty the form looked. No description of the suspects, no mention of the license plate, nothing about the bags they carried out. But what about Mr. Wilson's things? Shouldn't you check inside to see what's missing? Jaden persisted, unable to let it go. Officer Reynolds was already heading back to his patrol car. Kid, you're really starting to test my patience. If your neighbor comes back and finds something missing, he can file a report himself. Adults handling adult business, understand? As the officer climbed into his car, Jaden heard him mutter something about these kids watching too many crime shows and wasting police time. The cruiser pulled away, leaving Jaden standing alone on the sidewalk. The piece of paper with the incident number felt useless in his hand. He carefully folded it and put it in his pocket anyway. His dad would want to see it. Walking back to his bike, Jaden felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him. Anger at not being believed, worry for Mr. Wilson's belongings, disappointment in Officer Reynolds, but mostly determination. His dad had taught him to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. He got on his bike and rode home slowly, rehearsing in his mind how he would tell his dad everything. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. His father was returning from his 3-month deployment, and unlike Officer Reynolds, he always took Jaden seriously. As Jaden turned onto his street, he made a mental note of every detail he could remember, about the men, the car, and even Officer Reynolds' dismissive attitude. His dad had taught him that details matter, and when Sergeant David Johnson walked through the door tomorrow, those details would matter very much indeed. Jaden pushed his bike into the garage and headed inside, a new sense of resolve hardening within him. Officer Reynolds might think he was just a kid with an overactive imagination, but soon enough he'd learn exactly how wrong he was. The afternoon dragged on endlessly for Jaden. He tried to distract himself with homework, but his mind kept returning to what he'd seen and how Officer Reynolds had dismissed him. By evening, he'd barely touched his dinner, something his aunt noticed right away. "You're pushing those peas around like they've offended you," Aunt Tanya said, sliding into the chair across from him. She'd been staying with Jaden while his dad was deployed. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Jaden sighed, putting down his fork. "I saw someone rob Mr. Wilson's house today. I called the police, but the officer didn't believe me. He thought I was making it up." Aunt Tanya's eyebrows rose. "That doesn't sound right. Did you tell him everything you saw?" "I tried, but he kept laughing like I was telling some silly story." Jaden's voice cracked slightly with frustration. "He didn't even write down the license plate number I remembered." Aunt Tanya reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Your dad will be home tomorrow. He'll know what to do." I know, Jayden replied, a small smile finally breaking through his gloom. Later that night, as Jayden was getting ready for bed, his phone buzzed. It was a text from his dad. Just landed. We'll be home early tomorrow. Can't wait to see you, champ. For the first time since the incident, Jayden felt a weight lift from his shoulders. His dad would make things right. He always did. The sound of the front door opening jolted Jayden awake. Sunlight was already streaming through his bedroom window. He leaped out of bed, nearly tripping over his slippers as he raced downstairs. There, in the hallway, stood Sergeant David Johnson, still in his military fatigues, duffel bag at his feet. He looked tired from the long journey home, but his face lit up the moment he saw his son. "Dad!" Jayden launched himself into his father's arms. Sergeant Johnson caught him in a bear hug, lifting him clean off the ground despite Jayden no longer being a little kid. "There's my boy. Man, you've grown at least an inch since I left." For a moment, everything else melted away. The robbery, the dismissive officer, all of it. But as his dad set him down, reality came rushing back. "Dad, something happened yesterday," Jayden began, words tumbling out rapidly. "Mr. Wilson's house got robbed while he was away visiting his daughter, and I saw it happen and I called the police, but the officer didn't believe me and he laughed at me and he didn't even write anything down and—" Whoa, his father interrupted gently, placing his hands on Jayden's shoulders. "Slow down, let's sit down, and you can tell me everything from the beginning." They moved to the living room where Aunt Tanya had already prepared coffee. Sergeant Johnson listened intently as Jayden recounted every detail. The two men, the bags, the silver car with rust spots, the partial license plate, and Officer Reynolds' dismissive attitude. Unlike the officer, his father didn't interrupt or smirk. His expression grew increasingly serious as Jayden described how the officer had barely looked around the property and written nothing in his notepad. "Show me the incident number he gave you," his father said when Jayden finished. Jayden pulled the crumpled paper from his pocket and handed it over. His father examined it, his jaw tightening visibly. "This isn't even filled out properly," Sergeant Johnson said quietly, a controlled anger in his voice that Jayden recognized all too well. His father was furious, but keeping it in check. "Am I in trouble?" Jayden asked hesitantly. His father looked up, surprised. "In trouble?" "No, son. You did exactly what you should have done. You saw something wrong and reported it. You remembered important details. I'm proud of you." Relief washed over Jayden. "But the officer said—" "The officer was wrong," his father said firmly, "and I'm going to make sure he knows it." He stood up, military straight. "I need to shower and change, then we're going to pay a visit to the police station." As his father headed upstairs, Aunt Tanya gave Jayden a knowing smile. "Your dad hasn't changed a bit, still fighting for what's right." Jayden nodded, a new confidence building inside him. Officer Reynolds had no idea what was coming his way. "Dad," Jayden called after him, "are you going to wear your uniform?" His father paused on the stairs, turning back with a determined look. "Yes, son. I think this calls for the full dress uniform." The police station buzzed with the typical morning activity. Officers filing reports, phones ringing, and the constant hum of conversation. Officer Reynolds leaned against the front desk, coffee in hand, laughing with the desk sergeant about something trivial. His easy morning was about to change dramatically. The glass doors swung open and the entire room seemed to pause. Sergeant David Johnson stood in the entrance, his Special Forces dress uniform immaculate. Each medal and commendation gleamed under the fluorescent lights, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and several others that spoke of courage and sacrifice most people couldn't imagine. His posture was perfect, shoulders squared, chin slightly raised. The authority he carried wasn't from his uniform alone, but from the quiet confidence of a man who had faced real danger and survived. Beside him stood Jayden, looking both nervous and proud. He immediately spotted Officer Reynolds, whose smile had frozen on his face. As they approached the front desk, conversations hushed. Even veteran officers straightened their posture instinctively. The desk sergeant, a woman with gray-streaked, Hair and sharp eyes looked up with professional courtesy. "Good morning, ma'am," Sergeant Johnson said, his voice polite but firm. "My name is Sergeant David Johnson, U.S. Army Special Forces. I'd like to speak with your station captain regarding an incident that my son reported yesterday." The desk? Sergeant glanced at Jaden, then back to his father. "Regarding what matter, Sergeant?" "A breaking and entering at 1478 Maple Street, the home of retired Judge William Wilson." Sergeant Johnson's tone made it clear this wasn't a casual visit. Officer Reynolds suddenly found his coffee very interesting, studying it like it contained the secrets of the universe. "I see," the desk sergeant said, picking up her phone. "Captain Rivera is in. Let me see if he's available." While they waited, several officers approached Sergeant Johnson, shaking his hand and thanking him for his service. Each time he responded with genuine humility, but his focus never wavered from why they were there. Officer Reynolds tried to slip away unnoticed, but Sergeant Johnson's voice cut across the room. "Officer Reynolds, I believe you took my son's report yesterday. I'd appreciate it if you joined our meeting." Reynolds froze mid-step, his back to them. The entire room went silent. Slowly he turned around, attempting a casual smile that looked more like a grimace. "Of course, sir. Happy to help." Captain Rivera emerged from his office moments later. A former Marine himself, he instantly recognized the significance of the medals on Sergeant Johnson's uniform and extended his hand with genuine respect. "Sergeant Johnson, I'm Captain Rivera. Please, come into my office." He nodded to Officer Reynolds. "You too, Reynolds." The captain's office was modest but organized. He gestured for them to sit, taking his own seat behind a desk with neatly arranged files and a family photo. "Now, what can I help you with today, Sergeant?" "Sergeant." Johnson placed the crumpled incident report on the desk. "My son witnessed a burglary yesterday at Judge Wilson's residence. He called 911, waited for the police, and provided detailed information to Officer Reynolds here." His voice remained level, but his eyes held Reynolds in place. "From what I understand, his report was dismissed without proper investigation." Captain Rivera picked up the incident form, frowning at how incomplete it was. "Is this accurate, Officer Reynolds?" Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, we get calls from kids, all the time. Most turn out to be nothing. My son," Sergeant Johnson interrupted calmly, "provided a partial license plate number, detailed descriptions of the suspects, and information about the vehicle, none of which appears on this report." "With all due respect, sir," Reynolds said, turning slightly defensive, "I checked the property. There were no obvious signs of forced entry, except for the damaged side door." Jaden spoke up, his voice steadier than he expected. "The one you barely looked at?" Captain Rivera turned to Jaden. "Son, would you mind telling me exactly what you saw? Don't worry about what's already been reported. Start from the beginning." As Jaden recounted everything again, Captain Rivera took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Jaden finished, the captain leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "Officer Reynolds, this report should have been properly filed and investigated." The captain's disappointment was evident. Judge Wilson isn't just any homeowner. He served this community for 30 years on the bench. Reynolds looked down at his hands. "I thought the kid was exaggerating, sir. That's not your call to make," Captain Rivera stated firmly. "We investigate reports based on the information provided, not on assumptions about the witness." Sergeant Johnson remained composed, but his eyes never left Officer Reynolds. "My son was taught to respect authority and to report suspicious activity. Yesterday he learned that doing the right thing might get him ridiculed. That's not a lesson any child should learn, especially not from those sworn to protect and serve." Captain Rivera leaned forward in his chair, hands clasped together. "Let me make this right," he said, reaching for his phone. "First, let's check if there's any surveillance footage in the area." Officer Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the captain made a quick call to the department's technical division. Meanwhile, Sergeant Johnson remained perfectly still, his military discipline evident in his posture. Jaden glanced between the adults, hope rising in his chest. After hanging up, Captain Rivera nodded. "We're in luck. Mrs. Chen at 1482 Maple, installed a security system last month after the neighborhood association meeting. Her cameras might have caught something. Within minutes, a tech officer knocked and entered with a laptop. Already pulled the footage, sir. Mrs. Chen was very cooperative when I mentioned it might help Judge Wilson. They gathered around the laptop as the tech officer played the video. The camera angle captured the side of Judge Wilson's house and part of the street. At 2:17 p.m., exactly when Jayden said it happened, a silver sedan with visible rust spots on the rear bumper pulled up. There! Jayden pointed excitedly. That's the car I saw. Two men exited the vehicle, one tall wearing a red cap, the other shorter in a dark hoodie. They approached Judge Wilson's side door, looking around suspiciously before disappearing from view. 15 minutes later, they reappeared carrying bags, just as Jayden had described. Can you zoom in on the license plate? Captain Rivera asked. The tech officer enhanced the image. RT-7914, he read aloud. Jayden's eyes widened. RT-7, that's the part I remembered. Sergeant Johnson placed a proud hand on his son's shoulder. Good job, son. Captain Rivera turned to Officer Reynolds, whose face had drained of color. The boy's description was spot on, every detail. His voice carried the weight of disappointment in one of his officers. There's more, sir, the tech officer added. I ran the plate through the system. It's registered to a Leon Tucker. He's got priors for burglary and was released on parole 3 months ago. And the other suspect? Captain Rivera asked. Based on known associates, likely his cousin, Darren Tucker, also has a record. Officer Reynolds looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. I didn't think. That's right, you didn't think, Captain Rivera cut him off. But even worse, you didn't listen. He turned back to the tech officer, put out an APB on that vehicle and both suspects immediately. As the tech officer left to carry out the order, Captain Rivera turned his attention to another angle. Judge Wilson was more than just a respected judge. He was instrumental in establishing our community outreach programs. The items stolen could be invaluable, not just monetarily but sentimentally. Sir, Sergeant Johnson said calmly, my son mentioned that Judge Wilson is currently visiting his daughter. Has anyone contacted him about this? Captain Rivera shook his head. Not yet. Given Officer Reynolds' assessment, no one reached out. He glared at Reynolds before picking up his phone again. After a brief conversation explaining the situation to Judge Wilson, the captain's expression grew even more serious. He hung up and looked at everyone in the room. The judge says among the items likely taken was a safe in his study. It contained family heirlooms, including his late wife's jewelry, and medals awarded to his father, a World War II veteran. He turned to Officer Reynolds. Items that can never be replaced. The gravity of Reynolds' mistake hung heavy in the room. What he had dismissed as a child's imagination was a serious crime against someone who had dedicated his life to justice. Sir, Reynolds began, his voice subdued. I want to apologize to the boy, to Jayden. Jayden looked up, surprised to hear his name from the officer who had treated him with such disregard. I was wrong, Reynolds continued. I made assumptions based on your age, not on the information you provided. That was unprofessional and unfair. Captain Rivera nodded slightly, acknowledging the apology but clearly not considering the matter closed. This goes beyond an apology. Officer Reynolds, your failure to properly investigate could have resulted in evidence being lost forever. He turned to Sergeant Johnson and Jayden with genuine respect. Thankfully, we have citizens who take their civic duty seriously, regardless of their age. And we have the good fortune that Mrs. Chen installed those cameras. And that my son has an excellent memory, Sergeant Johnson added with quiet pride. Captain Rivera smiled for the first time since they'd entered his office. Indeed. Now let's see about recovering Judge Wilson's belongings. Within hours of the meeting in Captain Rivera's office, the entire police station was buzzing with activity. What had begun as one boy's dismissed report had transformed into a high-priority investigation. The silver sedan's license plate had been flagged in the system, and officers across the district were on alert. Detective Lee, a veteran investigator with a reputation for thoroughness, was assigned to lead the case. Unlike Officer Reynolds, she took Jayden's account seriously, inviting him and his father to help create detailed composite sketches of the suspects. "Your memory for details is impressive," Detective Lee told Jayden as he described the distinctive snake tattoo that coiled around the taller suspect's forearm. "Most adults don't notice half as much." Jayden glanced at his dad, who gave him an encouraging nod. "My dad always says to pay attention to my surroundings," he explained. "He says, details can save lives." "Your dad is absolutely right," Detective Lee agreed, looking at Sergeant Johnson with professional respect. "In military operations and police work alike." By late afternoon, the composite sketches were complete and distributed to all patrol units. Detective Lee also organized a team to visit local pawn shops with photos of Judge Wilson's missing items, based on the inventory he had provided over the phone. "Criminals like these usually try to unload valuable items quickly," she explained to Jayden and his father, "especially the jewelry." Captain Rivera kept them updated throughout the day, showing a level of transparency that impressed Sergeant Johnson. When the call finally came in, they were reviewing security footage from neighboring streets to track the car's route. "Sir," a young officer said, poking his head into the conference room, "they found the vehicle, parked behind an abandoned warehouse off Highway 16. Captain Rivera immediately ordered a tactical team to the location. "I want you to stay here," he told Jayden and Sergeant Johnson. "This could be dangerous." Jayden felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. His report was being taken seriously now, more seriously than he could have imagined. He watched the officers preparing, checking their gear with the same precision his father showed before deployments. "Will they catch them?" Jayden asked his dad quietly. "I'd bet on it," his father replied. "These officers know what they're doing." The tactical team moved out, leaving the station in tense anticipation. Officer Reynolds, who had been assigned to desk duty pending review of his conduct, kept glancing at the dispatch radio. The minutes crawled by. Jayden tried to stay patient but found himself pacing the small waiting area. His father remained calm, his military training evident in his composed demeanor. "All units, be advised," the radio crackled suddenly. "Suspects in custody. Repeat, both suspects in custody." A cheer went up throughout the station. Captain Rivera emerged from his office with a broad smile. They were still at the warehouse, sorting through the stolen goods, he announced. "And here's the best part. We recovered everything. Judge Wilson's safe was unopened. They couldn't crack it." Jayden couldn't contain his excitement, jumping up from his chair. "They got everything back? Even the medals?" "Everything," Captain Rivera confirmed. "The judge's father's medals, Mrs. Wilson's jewelry, all of it safe and sound." What happened next surprised everyone, especially Officer Reynolds. Captain Rivera called him forward. "Officer, I want you to be the one to personally inventory and secure all recovered items," he said firmly. "Every single piece needs to be photographed, logged, and stored properly until Judge Wilson returns." Reynolds straightened his posture. "Yes, sir. I'll take personal responsibility for each item." It was both a punishment and a chance at redemption, a way for Reynolds to face the consequences of his dismissal while also participating in making things right. As the recovered items began arriving at the station, Jayden watched in awe as officers carefully cataloged each one. There were antique watches, family photographs in silver frames, and a wooden box containing military medals, honors earned decades ago in service to the country. Detective Lee approached with a small velvet pouch. "You might appreciate this," she said, carefully opening it to reveal a Purple Heart medal. "Judge Wilson's father earned this in 1944. Because of you, it's being returned to the family where it belongs." Jayden looked at the medal, then at his father's uniform where the same medal was pinned. Different wars, different times, but the same sacrifice. "I was just doing what's right," Jayden said quietly. Detective Lee smiled. "That's exactly how it works. One person doing what's right can change everything." As evening approached, local news vans began gathering outside the station. The story of a young boy's observation leading to the recovery of a respected judge's irreplaceable family heirlooms had caught the media's attention. Captain Rivera approached Sergeant Johnson. "They want to interview your son about his role. In solving the case, it's entirely up to you both." Sergeant Johnson looked down at Jayden. "What do you think, son? Ready to tell your story?" Jayden thought for a moment, then smiled. "Only if Officer Reynolds admits he was wrong about me." 3 days after the arrest of the Tucker cousins, Judge Wilson returned early from his daughter's home. Word of the burglary and the remarkable story behind the recovery of his belongings had reached him through Captain Rivera's calls. The elderly judge arrived at the police station leaning slightly on a wooden cane, his thin frame belying the powerful presence he still commanded. Captain Rivera greeted him personally, leading him to the conference room where all his recovered possessions had been meticulously arranged and documented by Officer Reynolds. Jayden and his father had been invited for this moment, and they stood quietly as Judge Wilson surveyed the items with visible emotion. "Every piece is here," Judge Wilson said softly, touching the wooden box containing his father's war medals. "I never thought I'd see these again." His weathered hands carefully opened the box, revealing the Purple Heart and Bronze Star his father had earned decades ago. He turned toward Jayden, who stood straight beside his father. "Captain Rivera told me everything," the judge said. "About how you saw what happened, remembered the details, and stood your ground even when you weren't taken seriously." Jayden glanced at Officer Reynolds, who was standing in the corner of the room, unusually quiet. "It was just doing the right thing, sir," Jayden replied. Judge Wilson smiled warmly. "Doing the right thing when it's difficult is the very definition of courage, young man." The judge then did something unexpected. He asked Officer Reynolds to step forward. "Officer, I understand you've learned something from this experience," he said not unkindly. Reynolds nodded, his usual confidence replaced with genuine humility. "I have, Your Honor. I made a terrible mistake in judgment that could have cost you these irreplaceable treasures." He turned to Jayden. "I've already apologized privately, but I want to say publicly that I was wrong. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment, and I failed to do my job properly." Captain Rivera stepped forward. "We've implemented some changes as a result of this incident. All officers will undergo additional training on witness interview techniques, with special emphasis on taking all reports seriously, regardless of the witness's age." Judge Wilson nodded approvingly. "In my 30 years on the bench, I saw countless cases that hinged on the observations of ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things. Justice doesn't work without people willing to speak up." He turned back to Jayden. "Which is why I'd like to do something special." From his pocket, he produced a small box. Opening it revealed a pin in the shape of a shield. "This is a replica of the pin given to the first youth auxiliary program I helped establish 40 years ago. I'd like you to have it." As Jayden accepted the pin with wide eyes, flashbulbs popped. The local newspaper photographer captured the moment, the respected judge honoring the boy whose keen observation had saved his family's treasures. "That's not all," Captain Rivera added. "We're reinstating the junior deputy program that was cut from the budget 3 years ago. It will focus on teaching young people in our community about civic responsibility and the importance of observation skills." He smiled at Jayden. "And we'd like you to be our first new member." The small crowd of officers in the room applauded. Even Officer Reynolds joined in, his expression showing genuine support. Later, as they walked to their car, Sergeant Johnson placed his arm around his son's shoulders. "You know, there's an important lesson in all this," he said. "That adults should listen to kids more?" Jayden asked with a small smile. His father chuckled. "That too. But more importantly, it's about standing up for truth, even when people doubt you. It would have been easy to give up after Officer Reynolds dismissed your report." "I knew you'd believe me," Jayden said simply. "I'll always believe in you," his father replied. "But you need to always believe in yourself first. What you did took real courage." As they drove home, Jayden looked at the junior deputy pin in his palm, feeling a new sense of confidence. The experience had taught him something powerful. That age didn't determine the value of one's voice or the impact of one's actions. At school the next day, his classmates crowded around, asking questions about the newspaper article featuring his picture with Judge Wilson. His teacher used the story as a lesson about civic responsibility. Sometimes, she told the class, one person paying attention can make all the difference in the world. Jaden glanced down at the pin now attached to his backpack and smiled. He knew that was true. And he knew something else too, that the next time he saw something wrong, he wouldn't hesitate to speak up. Not because he'd be believed automatically, but because the truth was always worth fighting for.